Hi and welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about my second MAF test. This is measuring my mass aerobic function using the formula of 180 minus my age plus or minus 5 beats per minute depending on my health or fitness status. So for me that would be 180 minus 51, so 129 plus 5 because I'm reasonably fit at the moment. Recently ran a 1:36 half marathon. So the target range at the track yesterday was 134 beats per minute, not to exceed that, and not to look at my minute per mile or minute per kilometer pace on my watch whatsoever. So the last time I did this was just prior to the half marathon, and I did this at the end of August. We're now mid-November, so it was quite a while ago. When I did the test, it was a perfect day with nice temperatures, no wind, just a great day to go out there and do it. And I averaged 9 minutes and 32 seconds, average mile pace for the 5 miles. So 5 miles is the general recommendation to do that, with the mile split to look at being about mile 2 after you've warmed up. I was told to expect something a little slower than that. I've heard of people going out and ending up running 10 or 11 minute miles and being pretty dejected, so I felt pretty happy it wasn't too bad. Yesterday I went out to do the second MAF test, so it's been a while. My fitness has been improving, so just to add some context to this, pretty much every time I go and run, I'm seeing increases almost tenfold on my watch in terms of 5K, 10K, half marathon, and marathon predictor. And I can feel my fitness is really improving simply by just doing low aerobic running, so sticking below 134 beats per minute. Went to the track, 5 o'clock in the morning, 19 degrees Fahrenheit, which is actually -7 degrees Celsius. I was a little concerned that this may give my optical heart rate reading on my watch maybe some false numbers, and it proved to be right. I did the 5 mile test, and I had an average of 9 minutes and 41 seconds a mile. So that's 6:01 a kilometer pace. So that was actually slower than the first MAF test, which was 9:32 a mile or 5:50 a kilometer. So I decided to pull a little bit of research on this. I do have access to academic journals through an academic database, and I found some articles that were written in 2020. The first one was written by Ben Goldstein, Kibbe and Dunn, and they looked at variables with optical heart rate, and they found a few things. For example, it depends on the device type. Some devices were more accurate than others. They also looked at skin tone as well. This had been something that had been thrown around where people that may have darker shades of skin have reduced readings of optical heart rate. Essentially what this is, it's called PPG. And these devices emit a light through the skin and they're looking at vascular blood flow, which really is capillary blood flow, which comes from cardiac output. So there are a few variables or drawbacks with using the optical heart rate monitor. Obviously, it's not as accurate as a chest strap. A chest strap is within 1% of a medical quality, so medical grade EKG machine, which measures electrical activity. Optical heart rate measures capillary blood flow, which comes from cardiac output, but it's some distance away from the heart. So we've got to take these measurements with a grain of salt. Skin tone was proven to be not really a big factor. Device type was. But what they found in that study was that activity had a 30% variable. So at rest, these devices were fairly accurate. And Chow and Young in 2020 in their study found that, yes, these devices were very accurate at rest. But when it came to activity, as the first author, Ben Goldstein, Kibbe and Dunn, was that the variables were just too much. Harvard University did a third study, And they found that even with walking, the heart rate was falsely elevated. And these studies were compared with medical grade ECG machines or EKG machines. And those devices were compared to chest straps. So we're looking at wearables, measuring optical heart rate through capillary blood flow through the skin, and the comparison is medical grade, hospital grade EKG, ECG machine. So what went wrong with my MAF test? Well, what went wrong was the weather. And one of the biggest factors with these is cold. So being -7 degrees Celsius or 19 degrees Fahrenheit is just a little too much for these devices, and you are going to get falsely high heart rates. And we typically see falsely high heart rates with optical heart rate devices rather than falsely low. So there are a few recommendations. So if you do rely predominantly on a watch rather than a chest band or an optical armband, it's recommended, one of the manufacturers recommended this, is by finding where your wrist joint is, and you have the bone right here, put one finger width below, and then you're going to start your watch strap right here. In cold conditions or cold temperatures, obviously accept that the number's probably going to be wrong, but you want to do an additional finger width. So wrist joint, finger width, second finger width, and right there is where you're going to put your watch band. They also recommend having the watch tight, but not tight where it's going to restrict blood flow, because again, the watch is dependent on reading that blood flow. The other recommendation, most manufacturers said this, was cleaning the optical sensor under the watch with just warm, soapy water. Skin has oil on it. It puts oil on the sensor of the watch. And obviously that will factor the heart rate as well in terms of variables. They also recommend taking the watch off from time to time, allowing the skin to have some air, dry out a little bit. Hot conditions weren't so much of a variable in these studies, and neither really was sweat. It really came down to cold conditions, excessively cold conditions, wrist movement, with the watch being maybe a little loose. But at the end of the day, we do have to take these optical heart rate measurements from these wearables, and I'm talking about anything that's not a chest strap, with a grain of salt. So going forward, I will be having to move to a chest strap. I really wanted to go through the MAF journey with an optical heart rate monitor just to prove that it can be done. But unfortunately, if you are going to rely strictly on those heart rate numbers, it's really something that has to be done with a chest strap. Chest strap is measuring electrical activity or electrical conduction from the SA node down to the AV node. And I believe it's probably measuring lead 1 across your chest. That is an electrical representation of what's going on as opposed to distal blood flow. One of the last factors I do want to talk about, which I read in one of the studies too, was, and I've noticed this myself, is that when I was running downhill, going from a reasonably controlled heart rate, staying in my MAF zone, my MAF tone zone of less than 134 beats per minute, was I was seeing spikes in the heart rate. And I just couldn't understand why. These devices will pick up cadence, so cadence being increased or decreased movement of your legs, depending on the measurement. And when we're going downhill, quadricep muscles contract, means that there's increased blood flow, and that device is measuring spikes in increased blood flow, peripheral blood flow, and cadence from leg speed. So those things can also impact the numbers that you're seeing on your heart rate optical watch, which I had noticed a couple of times, and I would see it on the same hill every day, no matter what I was doing, in a controlled heart rate. So that explained that one. So thank you for watching my video. I'm definitely going to continue on this journey of low heart rate.